The call from the police station at 9:47 at night wasn't about my daughter being arrested. It was about 18 years of lies being exposed all at once, and my perfect husband finally being unmasked in front of the police, in front of me, and in front of God. I was sitting on the living room couch in our Denver home, watching some random episode of a series I couldn't really follow, when my cell phone vibrated on the coffee table. The name Hannah flashed on the screen, and my heart did that jump that every mother knows when her daughter calls late at night. But when I answered and heard that choked, broken voice saying, "Mom, I'm at the police station," my entire world stopped spinning. My name is Michelle Harper. I'm 42 years old, and until that Thursday night in September, I believed I had built the perfect life. A beautiful house in a quiet Denver neighborhood, with those enormous trees that turn golden in autumn and kids riding bikes through the streets without fear. Christopher, my husband, was a regional manager at a respected tech company, always impeccable in his custom-tailored suits, always punctual, always perfect. Hannah was 19 years old, in her second year at the University of Colorado Boulder, studying psychology, and she was my best friend, my confidant, my reason for breathing every day. But that night, as I held the phone with hands trembling so badly I almost dropped it, listening to my daughter sob on the other end of the line, I still didn't know that all of it, the house, the marriage, the perfect life, was just a carefully constructed facade over an abyss of lies. "Mom, you need to come here now. Please. I can't explain over the phone." Hannah was crying, and there was something in her voice I'd never heard before. It wasn't fear. It was pain. It was anger. It was shame. "Where's your father?" I asked automatically, because Christopher always knew what to do, always had the right answers, always solved everything with that irritating calm of his. The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. "It's about him, Mom. It's about Dad. Please, just come." I grabbed the car keys without even changing out of my pajamas, just threw a jacket over them and put on the first shoes I saw by the entrance. The police station was 20 minutes from home, but I drove like it was 20 hours, every red light an eternity, my mind spinning in circles trying to understand what the hell was happening. Hannah arrested? My daughter, who'd never even gotten detention in school, who was responsible, studious, who barely drank at college parties? And what did Christopher have to do with this? Maybe she'd crashed his car, I thought. Maybe she'd taken the car without permission and gotten into some accident. My brain clung to these simple, mundane explanations, because the alternative, that there was something bigger, darker, more destructive waiting for me, was impossible to process. When I parked in front of the Capitol Hill District Police Station, my legs could barely hold me up. The red brick building looked frightening under the yellowish streetlights, and there were only 2 other cars in the parking lot besides mine. I pushed through the glass door and was greeted by that characteristic police station smell. Stale coffee, dusty paper, cheap disinfectant trying to mask decades of humanity at its worst. A young officer, looking like he'd just graduated from the academy, was behind the counter. "I'm looking for my daughter, Hannah Harper. She called me and said she was here." He looked at the computer screen, typed something, and his face changed subtly. "Mrs. Harper? Please follow me." He led me down a narrow hallway, our footsteps echoing on the worn linoleum floor, and with each step my heart beat faster, louder, more desperate. We passed 3 closed doors until we reached a small waiting room with blue plastic chairs stuck to the wall and an old water fountain in the corner. And there she was, my Hannah, my girl, sitting with her shoulders hunched, blonde hair falling over her face, hands clasped between her knees, and when she raised her eyes to me, I saw they were red and swollen from crying so much. "Baby, what happened?" I ran to her and wrapped her in my arms, feeling her body tremble against mine. She smelled of expensive perfume, a perfume I didn't recognize, mixed with the cold sweat of panic. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry," she whispered into my shoulder, and her fingers dug into my back with force. "I didn't want you to find out like this. I tried to protect you, I swear I tried. But today, I saw Mom. I saw it with my own eyes, and I couldn't stay quiet." I pulled back a little to look into her eyes, holding her face between my hands. "See what, Hannah? What are you talking about? Where's your father?" She closed her eyes tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He's coming here. The police called him too. Mom, I hit her. I lost control and hit her in the face, and that's why they brought me here. But I don't regret it. I don't." "Hit who?" "Hannah, you're not making sense." My voice came out louder than I intended, echoing off the bare walls of the room. She opened her eyes and stared at me, and in that look was a devastating mixture of love, pity, and something that seemed like pity for me. Pity for me. His secretary, Mom, Vanessa. I saw them this afternoon at the Ritz-Carlton, going into a room together. I was there for an internship interview at the hotel and saw them in the lobby. They were, Mom, his hand was on her waist. He was whispering things in her ear, and she was laughing in that way, you know? That way that. She couldn't finish the sentence because a sob broke her voice in half. The world started spinning slowly as if someone had put everything in slow motion. Vanessa. I knew Vanessa. She was 28 years old, hair always perfectly blown out, nails always done, those tight suits she wore at the office. I'd had lunch with her 3 times at Christopher's company events. She'd been to my house at the last summer barbecue, had eaten the food I prepared, had laughed at my jokes, had called me Mrs. Harper, with that sweet, deferential smile. Hannah, are you sure? Maybe it was a work meeting, maybe. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew I was lying to myself. Work meetings don't happen at 4 in the afternoon in hotel rooms. Hands on waists aren't part of professional dynamics. Mom? I followed them. Hannah's voice was firmer now, as if telling the truth was giving her a strange strength. I waited in the lobby for 2 hours. I hid behind a column near the elevators, pretending to be on my phone. And when they came out, his shirt was different, Mom. He'd left the house in that light blue shirt you ironed yesterday morning, remember? But when he came out of the room, he was wearing a white shirt. He had a backup shirt. He planned this. Each word was a blade being slowly driven into my chest. He had a backup shirt. He planned this. How many times? For how long? I confronted them right there in the lobby. I screamed at him in front of everyone, called him a liar, a cheater, and Vanessa had the audacity to laugh at me, Mom. She laughed and said, "Your mother already knows, honey. She just pretends not to see." That's when I completely lost control and slapped her in the face. Before I could process that, she already knows, she pretends not to see. The room door opened and Christopher walked in. My husband. The man I'd shared a bed with for 18 years. He was wearing that white shirt Hannah had mentioned, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, brown hair slightly disheveled as if he'd run his hands through it many times. His blue eyes, those eyes that once made me feel protected, met mine for a second before looking away to Hannah. Hannah, this has gone too far, he said in that controlled, managerial tone, the same one he used in difficult meetings at work. You created an unnecessary scene, scared your mother, and now you need to apologize to Vanessa. She won't press charges if you apologize. Apologize? Hannah's voice exploded, high-pitched and incredulous. Are you fucking crazy? I'm not going to apologize for defending my mother from you and your mistress. I should have said something. Should have screamed, cried, demanded explanations. But I was paralyzed in that blue plastic chair, my body heavy as lead, my mind a white confusion of denial and shock. That's when the older officer entered the room, a man in his 50s with a prominent belly and tired eyes that had seen too much of human nature. Mr. Harper, I need to speak with you privately. Mrs. Harper, you can come too, please? He looked at Hannah with an expression I couldn't decipher. Was it compassion? Pity? Young lady, you stay here. We'll be right back. We followed the officer to another room, smaller, with just a metal table and 3 chairs. He closed the door behind us, and the sound of the lock clicking seemed deafening in the tense silence. Mrs. Harper, your husband came here because your daughter caused a small public disturbance at the hotel, and the other party involved, Ms. Vanessa Pritchard, initially wanted to file a complaint. He paused, looking from me to Christopher, assessing. But after talking to your daughter and verifying some things, Ms. Pritchard decided not to proceed with charges. Your daughter is free to go. I took a deep breath, ready to get Hannah and leave, take my girl home and deal with the rest later. But the officer kept talking. However, Mrs. Harper, there's something you need to know. He slid a manila folder across the table to me. In the course of our preliminary investigation of today's incident, we ended up discovering information that you have a right to know. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were printouts of emails, photos, bank statements. My eyes couldn't focus properly on the words, but some phrases jumped off the page as if written in fire. My love, can't stand hiding anymore. When are you going to tell her? The reservation for Cabo is confirmed for our 2-year anniversary. 2 years. They'd been together for 2 years. While I planned family dinners, while I took his shirts to the dry cleaners, while I celebrated our wedding anniversary alone because he was traveling for work. "There's more," said the officer, and his voice sounded distant, as if speaking from inside a tunnel. "We found evidence that this isn't the first time. There are at least 3 other women in the last 5 years, all employees of his company or partner companies." The sound that came from my throat wasn't human. It was a primitive animal moan of pure pain. Christopher finally spoke, his voice low but firm. "Michelle, we can talk about this at home. Not here, please." And for the first time in 18 years, I looked at my husband and didn't recognize the man before me. "Mrs. Harper," the officer continued, ignoring Christopher, "there's one last thing I need to show you." He turned one of the pages in the folder, revealing a photo. It was Christopher and Vanessa on some tropical beach, tanned and smiling, his arms around her, and on her finger. On her finger was a ring. "That's not possible," I whispered, but my voice had no strength at all. In the photo, Christopher wore a different wedding band than the one on his hand now. Vanessa had an engagement ring. "Mr. Harper proposed to this woman 6 months ago, Mrs. Harper," the officer said, and there was genuine kindness in his voice, as if he truly regretted having to tell me this. "The information came from a source at the company. Apparently, he told her that you two had been separated for years, but maintained appearances because of your daughter. Said the divorce was being finalized discreetly, and that soon he'd be free to marry her." I looked at Christopher and saw he'd closed his eyes, his hands clenched into fists on the table. He didn't deny it. Didn't say it was a lie, that it was a misunderstanding, that there was an explanation. He just sat there in silence, like a man awaiting his sentence. And it was in that moment, in that cold and sterile police station room, with that obscene photo before me and the smell of stale coffee invading my nostrils, that something inside me broke. It wasn't my heart. That was already shattered. It was something deeper. It was the entire structure of my reality, the foundation on which I'd built my identity for almost 2 decades. I was Michelle Harper, wife of Christopher Harper, mother of Hannah Harper, resident of Denver's safest neighborhood, the woman who did everything right. But now I didn't know who I was. And worse, I realized I'd never known who he was. "Mrs. Harper, are you okay?" The officer's voice sounded concerned. "Do you want a glass of water? Should I call someone?" I shook my head slowly, unable to form words. That's when I heard the sound of quick footsteps in the hallway and the door burst open. Hannah came in breathless, as if she'd been running, and her eyes immediately found the open folder on the table. She saw the photos, saw the documents, and then looked at Christopher with a hatred so pure, so distilled, that for a second I was afraid of what she might do. "You're disgusting," she spat the words. "You're absolutely disgusting. How do you sleep at night? How do you look in the mirror?" Christopher opened his mouth to respond, but Hannah didn't let him. "For years I thought it was my problem. I thought I was too critical, too judgmental, that I didn't understand the stress of your work. But I was right all along, wasn't I? My instincts were right. You weren't a good, hard-working father. You were a compulsive liar playing house. Hannah, you don't understand the complexities of an adult marriage," Christopher began, in that condescending tone I recognized so well. "No." My voice came out surprisingly firm when I finally managed to speak. I stood up from the chair, my legs shaky but holding me. "Don't talk to her like that. Not you. Not now. Not after this." I picked up the folder from the table and pressed it against my chest. "Officer, I need to file a restraining order. Now. Tonight. My daughter and I aren't going back to that house." Christopher went pale. "Michelle, you're being dramatic. Let's go home. Let's talk like civilized adults." "Civilized adults don't propose to their mistresses while still married," I replied. And for the first time in that entire horrible night, I felt something besides pain. I felt anger. And anger, I discovered, was much better than despair. The officer nodded slowly and pulled some forms from a drawer. "I can help you with that, Mrs. Harper. Let's get started." As he lined up the papers on the table, Hannah came to stand beside me and held my hand. Her fingers were ice cold, but the grip was strong, solid, real. "We're going to be okay, Mom," she whispered, but her voice trembled. "I promise. We're going to be okay." I looked at my daughter, this brave girl who'd risked being arrested to defend me, who'd seen the truth I refused to see, and nodded. But the truth? I had no idea if we were going to be okay. I had no idea about anything. My entire life had been a carefully orchestrated lie, and now that the veil had fallen, I was seeing for the first time the extent of the devastation. Christopher had stood up and was standing near the door, hands in his pockets, looking at the floor. "You're going to regret this, Michelle," he said quietly, not looking at me. "You're going to regret turning this into a public spectacle. We could have resolved this discreetly, like mature people." And it was that phrase, "you're going to regret this," that finally detonated something inside me. Not sadness, not fear, but a crystalline, cutting, absolutely irreversible clarity. "The only thing I regret," I said, my voice low but firm, "is that it took 18 years for my 19-year-old daughter to have more courage than me." I picked up the pen the officer offered me and started filling out the restraining order form. But as I wrote, my mind was already racing ahead, stumbling over questions I hadn't had time to process yet. 2 decades of marriage, 2 decades of shared mornings, family dinners, "I love yous," whispered in the dark. How much of that had been real? How much had been theater? And the question that hurt most, the one I knew would haunt me in the sleepless nights to come. For how long had I known, in some dark and cowardly corner of my soul, and simply chosen not to see? But to understand how I got to that cold police station on a September night, I need to go back in time and be brutally honest about the signs I ignored. The first one appeared 3 years earlier, on an ordinary Saturday morning in our sunny kitchen. Christopher was making pancakes, something he loved to do on weekends, and his phone buzzed on the counter. He had his hands dirty with batter when he picked up the phone, looked at the screen, and his expression changed for a fraction of a second. It was so quick I almost missed it, but I saw. His eyes widened slightly, his jaw tensed, and then he smiled that way too casual way and said it was work. On a Saturday morning, work. He wiped his hands on the apron, typed something quickly, and went back to the pancakes as if nothing had happened. My intuition screamed something in that moment, but I silenced it with rationalization. He was a regional manager after all. Emergencies happened. The signs continued, small and spaced out enough that I could ignore them individually, but forming a disturbing pattern when seen together. Christopher started going to the gym at 5:30 in the morning, every day, religiously. He'd never been a morning person, but suddenly he was jumping out of bed at 5 in the morning with strange enthusiasm. He'd come home at 7, always already showered, hair still damp, smelling of a different soap than what we used at home. When I asked about it, he said the gym had better products in the locker rooms. Made sense. Everything always made sense when he explained it. The work trips became more frequent too. Before he traveled maybe once a month, but suddenly it was 2, 3 times. Seattle, San Francisco, Phoenix, Austin. Always big cities, always for 3 or 4 days. He came back with little gifts for Hannah and me, as if that compensated for his absence. A keychain from Seattle, a refrigerator magnet from Austin, expensive chocolates from San Francisco. I started noticing he always kept his phone face down. Always. On the dinner table, on the coffee table, on the bedroom dresser. The screen always facing down, as if protecting something. When I casually asked why he did that, Christopher laughed and said it was so he wouldn't be distracted by notifications, that he wanted to be present when he was home. Sounded like something a good husband would say, so I believed it. Wanted to believe. God, how I wanted to believe. But there was more. The passwords. Christopher changed all his passwords over a 2-month period. Phone, laptop, iPad, even the Netflix password. When Hannah complained she couldn't use his streaming account anymore, he said it was for security, that he'd read about hackers and was being more careful. Again, made sense. Everything always made sense on the surface. But beneath that smooth, logical surface, something was rotting. The late-night calls started around that time, too. He was in the home office, door closed, and I could hear his muffled voice through the wood. The tone was different on those calls. Softer, more intimate. There were low laughs I didn't recognize. One night, I knocked on the door to ask if he wanted coffee, and there was sudden silence before he said, voice loud and clear now, completely professional. "Yes, John. We can review those numbers Monday." When he opened the door, he was smiling normally, as if nothing had happened, but I'd heard that change in tone, had felt that guilty silence. I knew. On some deep, primitive level, I knew. But knowing and accepting are 2 completely different things. So I swallowed that bad feeling and offered the coffee with a smile. Hannah started making comments too. Little things, observations she'd throw out casually, but that carried a weight I pretended not to feel. "Dad's always on his phone lately," she said once while the 3 of us were having dinner. Christopher laughed and said it was work. Always work. Why did Dad buy new clothes? He never cares about clothes, she commented another time. And it was true. Suddenly, there were new shirts in his closet, more modern, tighter fitting, black boxer briefs instead of the usual white ones, a new cologne, more expensive, more sophisticated. When I asked, he said he was trying to take better care of himself, have more pride in his appearance. I complimented him, said I was happy he was investing in himself. But inside, that voice whispered, "Men don't change their underwear at 43 for no reason." I ignored it. The sex changed too. In the first years of our marriage, we made love 2 or 3 times a week. After Hannah was born, it dropped to once a week, maybe twice. Normal, friends said. Normal for busy parents. But then it started decreasing even more. Once every 2 weeks. Once a month. And when it happened, Christopher seemed distant, mechanical, as if fulfilling an obligation. His eyes never met mine. His kisses were quick, passionless. He'd finish quickly and roll to the side, already picking up his phone to check something. I convinced myself it was age, stress, long marriage, all the convenient excuses married women learn to use to avoid facing the truth. But there was one night, about a year before that night at the police station, when I tried to initiate something. I put on new lingerie, lit candles, did the whole theater. Christopher looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. It wasn't desire. It wasn't love. It was poorly disguised irritation. "I'm exhausted, Michelle. I had a hellish day at work. Can we do this another day?" Another day never came. That night, I cried in the bathroom silently so he wouldn't hear, and for the first time I allowed the word cheating to cross my mind. But immediately I pushed it away, locking it in a dark compartment where I kept all thoughts that were too dangerous to examine. Christopher wouldn't cheat. We had a good life, a beautiful house, a wonderful daughter. Why would he risk all that? I asked myself that question like a mantra, like protection against the truth that was seeping through the cracks of my denial. The company dinners became events without me. Before, Christopher always insisted I go, said I was his anchor, his favorite company. But in the last 2 years, suddenly it became inconvenient for me to go. "It's so boring, honey. Just office gossip and bad drinks. You'll be bored," he'd say, kissing my forehead. The few times I insisted on going, I noticed something strange. The female secretaries and assistants from the office seemed uncomfortable around me. They avoided prolonged eye contact. Conversations died when I approached. And Vanessa. God, Vanessa was always there. Always impeccable in her black suits. Always laughing at Christopher's jokes. Always finding reasons to touch his arm, his shoulder, his hand. "She's very dedicated," Christopher would say when I commented, in that tone suggesting I was being insecure. "She's ambitious, wants to grow in the company. It's nothing." And I believed, or pretended to believe. What was the difference in the end? The bank statements started showing strange expenses. Expensive restaurants on days Christopher said he was working late. Hotels in cities where he supposedly wasn't traveling. Once I confronted him about a $500 charge at the Ritz-Carlton, Denver. "It was a business dinner with important clients," he explained patiently, as if talking to a child. "Needed to impress. You know how these things work." I didn't know. I'd never worked in a corporate environment. Had left my career in graphic design when Hannah was born, a decision Christopher enthusiastically supported. "You're going to be an incredible stay-at-home mom," he'd said, and it sounded like a compliment at the time. Years later, I realized it had also been a form of control. Without my own money, without my own career, without my own identity outside of Christopher's wife and Hannah's mother, I was trapped, dependent, vulnerable. But at that time, I didn't see it that way. Saw it as love, as him taking care of us, as a traditional, stable marriage. Friends started asking questions too. Sarah, my best friend since college, called me to lunch one day and said, hesitant, careful, "Michelle, are you and Christopher okay? You seem distant lately." I laughed and said we were fine, just busy, you know how it is. She didn't insist, but I saw the worry in her eyes, saw that she didn't believe me. Worse, saw that she knew something I refused to see. Hannah got closer to me and more distant from Christopher during that period. She'd make excuses not to have dinner with him when I wasn't there. Spent less time at home, preferring to stay in the dorm at college even on weekends. When I asked if everything was okay between her and her father, she was quiet for a moment too long, and then said, "He's changed, Mom. Don't you notice? He's not the same anymore." But I laughed nervously and said everyone changes, that it was natural, that she was exaggerating. I saw the disappointment on her face. My daughter was trying to warn me, was trying to protect me, and I was dismissing her. That must have hurt her. God, how it must have hurt. There was a specific moment, about 6 months before the night at the police station, when I almost faced the truth. Christopher was in the shower and his phone was on the bedroom dresser, unlocked. He'd forgotten to lock it, a rare mistake for someone so careful. It was literally 3 steps away. All I had to do was pick it up and look. 3 steps. 5 seconds. And I would know. I stood there frozen, hearing the sound of water falling in the bathroom, my heart beating so hard it hurt. My hand reached out, trembling. My fingers almost touched the device. But then I pulled back. Pulled back because if I looked and found something, I'd have to act. Would have to make hard choices, destroy my comfortable life, face devastating truths. And I wasn't ready. God forgive me. I wasn't ready. So I went back to bed, picked up my own phone, and pretended to be reading something fascinating, while my last chance to discover the truth on my own terms drained away with the shower water. That cowardice haunts me to this day. If I'd looked that day, maybe I would have discovered before he proposed to Vanessa. Maybe I would have saved myself from 6 more months of lies. Maybe, but probably not. Probably I would have found some way to rationalize whatever was on that phone. Some innocent explanation for messages that clearly weren't innocent. The human capacity for self-deception is truly impressive. In the week before that fateful night, Christopher was different. More irritated, more impatient, as if something was pressing on him. We argued about silly things, small things that had never been a problem before. The way I arranged dishes in the dishwasher, the fact that Hannah came for dinner without warning, the air conditioning temperature. Everything was a reason for tension, as if he was looking for reasons to fight, creating distance purposefully. I walked on eggshells around the house, trying not to provoke him, not understanding that the problem was never me. The problem was that he was living 2 lives, and the weight of it was finally starting to crack his perfect facade. The night before everything exploded, we had what would be our last normal conversation. We were watching television, each in a corner of the sofa, the space between us seeming bigger than ever. A jewelry commercial passed, showing a man proposing to a woman, and Christopher changed the channel quickly. I commented it was cute, that commercial, reminded me of when he proposed to me so long ago. He didn't respond, just kept changing channels, as if he hadn't heard me. Now I know why. He'd already proposed to another woman, had already chosen a ring, knelt on a tropical beach, promised a life together. While I sat on the sofa beside him, naive and pathetic, still believing in some remnant of our marriage, he was mentally planning his future with someone else, wearing the ring I put on his finger, sleeping in the bed we bought together, living in the house we built as a family. And the next morning, he kissed my forehead before leaving for work, said "love you" in that automatic, routine voice, and went to meet Vanessa at the Ritz-Carlton, where my brave daughter would catch them, where the carefully constructed lie would finally crumble, where my life as I knew it would come to an end. But that morning, making coffee in the sunny kitchen, watching Christopher adjust his tie in the window's reflection, I still didn't know that in less than 12 hours, I'd be sitting in a police station, looking at photos of him with another woman, filling out restraining order forms and realizing that the last years of my life had been an elaborate work of fiction, where I was simultaneously the protagonist and the only person who didn't know she was in a play. The 3 days following that night at the police station were a vertiginous descent into hell. Hannah and I checked into a hotel near the airport, one of those generic places with beige carpet and bland paintings on the walls, because I couldn't process the idea of going to anyone's known house and having to explain, having to see the pity in people's eyes. The temporary restraining order was approved that same night, which meant Christopher couldn't come near us for at least 2 weeks until the preliminary hearing. Lying in that hotel bed that smelled of industrial detergent, with Hannah sleeping restlessly in the bed next to mine, I began to feel the first symptoms of what would become a complete collapse. My body simply stopped functioning normally. I couldn't eat. Every attempt to swallow food resulted in violent nausea. I lost 7 kilos that first week. My skin turned gray, my eyes sunken and red from crying so much. I'd look in the hotel bathroom mirror and didn't recognize the woman looking back. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Christopher called dozens of times a day, left messages alternating between desperate pleas and icy anger. "Michelle, please answer. We can work this out. You're letting Hannah poison your head against me. I can explain everything if you give me a chance." And then, minutes later, "You're being ridiculous. You're destroying our family because of a misunderstanding. You've always been too dramatic. I blocked his number, but he started calling from unknown numbers, from the office phone, even from his mother's phone. The only person I answered was my lawyer, Patricia Simmons, a woman in her mid-50s with short gray hair and an expression that had seen everything. She came to the hotel on the second day with a folder full of documents. "Michelle, I need you to be strong now," she said, sitting in the plastic chair near the window. "We're going to have to act fast. He's already hired a lawyer, one of the best in the city, and is preparing a narrative." Christopher's narrative, according to Patricia, was that I was mentally unstable, that I was having a psychotic episode, that Hannah had problems with paternal authority and was manipulating the situation. He was painting himself as the victim of an irrational wife and a rebellious daughter. "He's telling coworkers that you've always been jealous and paranoid," Patricia explained, her voice firm but gentle. "That you accused him of cheating without basis, that you made scenes. He's building a history that you're the problem." That left me breathless. In 18 years of marriage, I'd never made a scene, never publicly accused him, had been the perfect wife, silent, compliant. And now that passivity was being used against me, rewritten as hysteria, as instability, I started doubting my own sanity. Maybe I was crazy. Maybe all of this was really a giant misunderstanding and I was destroying my family for nothing. It was Hannah who brought me back to reality. "Mom, look at me," she said, holding my face between her hands. I was there, I saw him with her, saw his hands on her, saw how he looked at her, and the police have the evidence, the emails, the photos, the ring. You're not crazy. He's the one trying to make you think you are." But knowing intellectually that I wasn't crazy and actually believing it were different things, Christopher had spent years conditioning me to doubt my own instincts, to believe my perceptions were wrong, that I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too insecure. This systematic gaslighting didn't disappear overnight just because now I had proof. It was rooted in me like poison. On the fourth day, I needed to go to the house to get some clothes and important documents. Patricia insisted on going with me, along with a police officer, to ensure Christopher wasn't there. The trip back to that house where I'd lived for 15 years was surreal. Everything looked exactly the same but completely different, as if I was seeing through a distorted lens. The perfectly manicured lawn I loved now seemed fake, scenographic. The blue front door I'd chosen so carefully now seemed like the entrance to a prison. When we entered, the familiar smell of home, that mix of coffee and lavender from the diffuser I religiously refilled, hit me like a punch to the stomach. Hannah held my hand as we went upstairs to the bedroom I shared with Christopher. Our bed was still unmade on his side, the sheets wrinkled keeping the shape of his body. I saw one of his shirts thrown on the chair and had to run to the bathroom to vomit yellow bile because my stomach had been empty for days. "Breathe, Mom. Breathe," Hannah repeated, holding my hair back. When I managed to stand up, I looked around the bathroom and saw his toothbrush still in the cup by the sink, his razor, his deodorant, little pieces of him scattered everywhere like evidence of a life that would never exist again. I started throwing clothes into a suitcase without method, just grabbing whatever I saw. I was shaking so badly I could barely hold the hangers. That's when Hannah opened Christopher's dresser drawer, the bottom drawer where he kept old t-shirts and gym shorts. "Mom," she called, her voice strange. "There's something here at the bottom." She pulled the false bottom of the drawer, something I didn't even know existed, and revealed a hidden shoebox. Inside were more photos. Dozens of them. Christopher with Vanessa, but also Christopher with other women I didn't recognize. In restaurants, in hotels, on beaches. There were also receipts for expensive gifts, jewelry I never received, dinners on dates he said he was in meetings. And there was something worse. A second phone. Old, probably without battery for months, but there it was. Physical proof of a double life. Of secrets within secrets. Patricia, who was waiting at the bedroom door, took the box with gloves. "I'm going to need this. It's crucial evidence." I felt my legs give out and sat on the closet floor, among his shoes, and something inside me completely ruptured. The sound that came from me wasn't crying. It was an animal howl, primitive, coming from a place so deep I didn't know it existed. It was the pain of 18 years being shattered at once. It was the shame of being deceived so completely. It was the anger of wasting the best years of my life with a man who never loved me. Not really. Hannah knelt beside me, hugging me while I screamed in that closet, my body shaking with violent sobs. "Let it out, Mom. Let it all out," she whispered. And she was crying too, her tears falling on my hair. We stayed there on the floor for 20 minutes until I had nothing left inside me. just an immense, painful emptiness that seemed to occupy all the space where my heart used to be. Patricia helped me up, and we finished getting what we needed in silence. But before leaving, I made a stop at Christopher's office. I sat in his chair, spun to look out the window overlooking our yard, and allowed myself to feel anger for the first time. Pure anger, not mixed with pain or confusion. He had sat in this same chair, in this same office inside our house, and planned his betrayal. Had laughed on the phone with other women while I washed his clothes downstairs. Had chosen gifts for Vanessa using money from our joint account. Had planned a future with her while pretending a present with me. The audacity of it, the calculated cruelty, finally penetrated through the fog of pain. I picked up the expensive pen I'd given him on his last birthday, that Mont Blanc that cost $300 we could barely afford, and broke it in half. Small gesture. Insignificant, really. But it was the first act of anger, of agency, of refusal to continue being the passive victim. Hannah saw and said nothing, just nodded. We returned to the hotel with 3 suitcases of clothes and a box of documents, but what we really brought was irrefutable proof of the extent of the betrayal. Patricia started building the case for divorce, using the photos, the receipts, the hidden phone. You're going to come out of this with a fair division of assets, Michelle. Maybe even more, considering the evidence of misconduct. But I didn't care about money at that moment. I cared about the fact that my entire life was based on lies. The sleepless nights began in force that week. I'd lie awake in the dark, listening to Hannah breathe in the bed next to mine, and my mind spun in spirals of unanswered questions. How many times did he have sex with another woman and then come home and have sex with me? How many times did he say I love you to her and to me on the same day? That trip we took to San Diego 2 years ago, our second honeymoon, was he thinking about her? That Christmas when we held hands around the table and gave thanks for our blessed family, was he lying then too? The questions were infinite, torturous, and there were no answers that brought peace. I started having panic attacks. The first one happened in the hotel hallway. I was coming back from the ice machine when suddenly I couldn't breathe. The hallway narrowed, the walls closing in, my heart racing so fast I thought I was having a heart attack. I fell to my knees on the beige carpet, trying to pull air, convinced I was going to die there. Hannah found me, called emergency, and we spent 4 hours at the hospital while they ran tests that found nothing physically wrong. It's severe anxiety, the doctor explained, prescribing Xanax and advising therapy. Anxiety, as if it were that simple, as if it wasn't my entire life falling apart. The attacks continued. At the supermarket when I saw a woman who looked like Vanessa. In the parking lot when I saw a car like Christopher's. In the bank line when I heard someone laugh in a way that reminded me of him. My body was in constant alert, nervous system completely dysregulated, interpreting everything as a threat. I started taking the medication just to be able to function. Social media became a minefield. People I considered friends posted photos with Christopher, office dinners where he was smiling, apparently unaffected. Comments saying, "We miss you, Michelle," that seemed more accusatory than supportive, as if I'd abandoned the group, as if I was the problem. I blocked most of them, but not before seeing a post from Vanessa, an old photo of her and Christopher at a company event, the caption saying something about incredible colleagues. The comments were full of little hearts and support emojis. Nobody knew, or if they knew, they didn't care. Sarah finally reached me after days of trying. She came to the hotel with Thai food I couldn't eat and a bottle of wine I drank too quickly on an empty stomach. "I knew," she said, her voice broken with guilt. "Michelle, I'm so sorry, but I knew. I saw him with a woman 6 months ago, at a downtown restaurant. They didn't look like coworkers. And I didn't tell you because I was afraid you'd hate me for bringing the news. I was a coward, and you deserve to know." Part of me wanted to scream at her, blame her. But the truth is, I'd also been a coward, had seen the signs, and chosen to ignore them. Couldn't throw stones when I'd lived in such a fragile glass house. I knew too, I admitted for the first time out loud. Not the details, but I knew something was wrong. And I did nothing, so I guess we're both cowards. We laughed, that bitter laugh of women who understand the complexity of loving someone who doesn't deserve it, of protecting a lie because the truth is too terrible. In the second week, Christopher started appearing in places he shouldn't be. The restraining order prohibited him from coming near Hannah and me, but somehow he was always nearby. I saw his car slowly passing the hotel parking lot, saw him sitting in a cafe across the street when I went to the lawyer's office. Never close enough to technically violate the order, but always visible, always present, a constant reminder that he was watching. It was terrifying. Patricia said to document everything, take photos, but each sighting left me more paranoid, more scared. He was playing a psychological game, demonstrating that he still had power over me, that he could still reach me, and it was working. I stopped leaving the hotel room except when absolutely necessary. Hannah did the shopping, brought food, became my connection to the outside world. She missed 2 weeks of classes taking care of me, her destroyed mother who could barely shower alone. The guilt of that was crushing. I should be taking care of her, not the other way around. She was 19 years old, should be at parties, worrying about exams, dating, living, not grocery shopping for her mother having a nervous breakdown in a cheap hotel room. You'd do the same for me, she said when I tried to apologize, and I knew it was true. But that didn't make it less painful. Christopher finally managed to contact me through his lawyer. He wanted to talk civilly about the division of assets, wanted to propose an agreement. Patricia advised against any direct contact, but he was persistent, sending letter after letter through the lawyers, each more manipulative than the last. Think about Hannah. Do you want her to see her parents fighting in court? I can give you the house, the car, half the pension. Just don't make this public. You were always the only one, Michelle. I made a terrible mistake, but we can overcome this if you want to try. The letters made me nauseous. The audacity of still trying to manipulate me, of still pretending this was a forgivable mistake, as if there weren't photos of him proposing to another woman, as if there weren't years of systematic lies, as if I were stupid enough to fall for this again. But the scariest part of me still wanted to believe him, still wanted there to be an explanation that made everything make sense, that restored my marriage, my life, my identity as Christopher Harper's wife. That pathetic desire to return to the comfortable lie terrified me more than anything. It meant he still had power over me. It meant 18 years of conditioning didn't disappear just because now I had proof of betrayal. The preliminary hearing for the permanent restraining order was scheduled for 3 weeks after that night at the police station. Patricia prepared me to see Christopher for the first time since the station. He'll be on his best behavior. Expensive suit, respectful attitude. He'll try to seem like the victim. Don't react. Don't look at him more than necessary. But when I entered that courtroom, small and windowless, and saw Christopher sitting next to his lawyer, impeccable in his navy blue suit, hair perfectly combed, that expression of controlled concern, something inside me crumbled again. He looked so normal, so sane, so convincing. He looked at me with those eyes I once loved, and for a horrible second, I doubted everything. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe we could work this out. Maybe. But then Hannah squeezed my hand under the table, bringing me back to reality, and I remembered the ring on Vanessa's finger in that photo, and the fog dissipated. There was no maybe. There was only brutal truth. The hearing lasted only 40 minutes, but they were the longest 40 minutes of my life. Christopher's lawyer, a 60-year-old man named Richard Brennan with perfectly cut gray hair and a suit that probably cost more than my car, presented Christopher as a dedicated family man who was being victimized by unfounded accusations based on jealousy and mental instability. He talked about my history of anxiety, about how I'd isolated Hannah against her father, about how the restraining order was clearly excessive for a situation that could be resolved with couples therapy. I heard those words coming from his mouth and felt like I was floating outside my body, watching my life being rewritten in real time. History of anxiety. I'd never had anxiety before this, had been the most stable, predictable, boring person in the world. But now, because I was having panic attacks after discovering years of betrayal, this was being used as proof that I was the problem. Patricia presented the evidence. The photos, the emails, the hidden phone, the engagement ring. The judge, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses hanging on a chain, examined everything with a neutral expression that revealed nothing. Christopher maintained his composure almost perfectly, just a muscle tensing in his jaw when the photos of him and Vanessa were shown. When it was his turn to speak, he looked directly at the judge, avoiding my gaze completely. Your Honor, I won't deny that I made serious mistakes in my marriage. I betrayed my wife's trust, and that's unforgivable. But never, at any point, did I represent a physical threat to her or my daughter. This restraining order is destroying my professional reputation and preventing me from having a relationship with Hannah. I ask that it be revoked so we can resolve our family situation privately and with dignity. His voice was calm, measured, reasonable. He seemed like the rational adult dealing with a hysterical wife. I looked around the room and saw some faces showing sympathy for him. It was working. But then Hannah asked to speak. Patricia didn't expect this, tried to dissuade her with a look, but my daughter was already standing. Your Honor, may I say something? The judge hesitated, then nodded. Hannah took a deep breath, and when she started speaking, her voice trembled but was firm. My father is lying. Not about the cheating, he admitted that, but about never being a threat. 3 days ago, he showed up outside my dorm at the university, even knowing about the restraining order. He tried to convince me to convince my mother to drop the divorce. When I refused, he said— She paused, swallowed hard, her hands shaking. He said he was going to make sure my mother got nothing in the divorce, that he was going to prove she was unstable, that he was going to destroy her reputation. Those were his exact words. I'm going to destroy her. That doesn't sound like someone harmless to me. The silence that followed was absolute. Christopher went pale, his fists clenching on the table. Richard Brennan whispered something urgent in his ear, but the damage was done. The judge removed her glasses, cleaned them slowly, and when she looked at Christopher, her expression was no longer neutral. Mr. Harper, did you approach your daughter in violation of the temporary restraining order? Christopher opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. It was just a conversation. I didn't get physically close to her. I just wanted to talk. That's not what I asked. Did you approach her or not? Yes, but— There are no buts, Mr. Harper. The temporary restraining order prohibits contact. You violated that order. She looked at the documents in front of her, then back at him. The restraining order will be extended for 6 months, with possibility of renewal. And Mr. Harper, if you violate it again, there will be criminal consequences. Are we understood? Christopher nodded, but his eyes met mine for the first time, and what I saw there chilled me. It wasn't regret. It was fury. Cold, calculated fury, promising retribution. We left the courthouse in silence. In the parking lot, Hannah collapsed in my arms. I lied, Mom. He didn't say he was going to destroy you. He said you'd regret it, but I needed the judge to understand that he's not safe. My heart stopped. Hannah, you can't lie in court. That's perjury. If they find out— I don't care, she screamed, her nails digging into my arms. I don't care, okay? He lied to you for years. He's lying now, saying he's not dangerous, but I see it in his eyes, Mom. I see that he wants to hurt you. Maybe not physically, but in every other way. And if I had to lie to protect you, then so be it. I should have reprimanded her. Should have explained about integrity, about how we can't lower ourselves to their level. But looking at my 19-year-old daughter, this girl who'd sacrificed her peace to save me, I just hugged her tighter and whispered, "Thank you." What did that say about who I was becoming? I don't know. I just know that in that moment, gratitude was stronger than guilt. We returned to the hotel, but something had changed. Winning at the hearing should have made me feel better, safer. But instead, it felt like I'd officially declared war, and Christopher wasn't the type to accept defeat. That night, I woke up at 3 a.m. with a terrifying certainty. He was going to destroy my life in ways I couldn't even imagine yet. And I was right. In the following days, Christopher began a systematic campaign of destruction. First, he froze all our joint accounts. Patricia said it was illegal, that she'd fix it. But meanwhile, I had no access to any money. My credit card was declined at the supermarket in front of a line of people. I had to call Hannah asking to borrow money from her emergency fund. The shame of that was crushing. Then came the emails to our friends. Christopher sent a long, carefully written message to everyone on our contact list. I never saw the exact content because everyone stopped responding to me immediately, but Sarah told me later. He said I was having a nervous breakdown, that I had paranoid tendencies, that he was worried about my mental health, and that Hannah was being negatively influenced by me. He asked friends to respect his space while he tried to take care of the family through this crisis. People believed. Of course they believed. Christopher had always been charismatic, reliable, the kind of man others admired. And me? I'd always been quiet, in his shadow, defined by my role as wife. I didn't have a strong enough independent identity to combat his narrative. Invitations to events stopped coming. Friends I'd had coffee with for years were suddenly too busy. The book club I'd attended religiously for 7 years removed me from the chat without explanation. In 1 week, I was completely socially isolated. It was as if I'd ceased to exist for everyone except Hannah and Patricia. The loneliness was suffocating, a physical weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. But worse than social isolation was when Christopher started attacking my sanity through other means. Items started disappearing and reappearing. My wallet, which I swore I'd put in my purse, appeared in the bathroom drawer. My car keys disappeared and appeared under the hotel pillow. At first, I thought I was becoming forgetful because of stress, but it happened too frequently, in ways too specific. Hannah noticed too. "Mom, did you lock the door last night?" "Of course. I always lock it." It was unlocked this morning when I woke up. Cold terror. Someone had entered the room while we slept. Did Christopher have a copy of the keycard? Had he bribed someone at reception? We complained to hotel management, but they said there was no record of anyone using an extra keycard. Maybe we'd forgotten to lock. Maybe we were stressed and confused. Maybe. Always maybe. Always that seed of doubt being planted. We changed hotels to a more expensive one we could barely afford, one that required facial recognition to access the floors. But the feeling of being watched, followed, manipulated didn't disappear. I saw Christopher everywhere, or thought I saw him. A man with similar height at the supermarket. A car that looked like his 3 cars behind in traffic. A shadow in the parking lot at night. I was really going crazy now, and part of me wondered if that was exactly what he wanted. If I really had a complete breakdown, it would prove his narrative. It would be the evidence he needed to destroy me in court. I stopped sleeping completely. Even with medication, even exhausted to the bone, my body refused to shut down. I'd lie awake all night, every sound in the hotel hallway making me jump, my heart racing, sweaty hands clutching the phone ready to call the police. Hannah started sleeping in my bed, and we took turns on watch shifts, like soldiers in a war zone. What kind of life was this? What kind of existence was living with so much fear that you couldn't even close your eyes? Paranoia infiltrated every aspect of my life. I was sure my phone was being monitored, that there were hidden cameras in the room, that every person who passed me in the hallway was an informant of his. Patricia gently suggested I talk to a therapist, but I vehemently refused. It can't be in my medical history that I sought psychological help now. He'll use it against me. She tried to argue that taking care of mental health wasn't weakness, but I was beyond logic. I was surviving in constant panic mode. It was around that time I started having thoughts about simply giving up. Not suicidal exactly, but giving up. Going back to him. Accepting the betrayals. Living in the comfortable lie if it meant the terror would stop. Part of me whispered it would be easier. That I wasn't strong enough for this. That maybe he was right, and I really was unstable, dramatic, incapable of forgiving a mistake. Those voices got louder at 3 a.m. when I was awake in the dark. Hannah finally sleeping exhausted beside me, and the silence of the hotel room seemed to scream my own inadequacy. "You can't do this," the voices said. "You're not strong enough. You're going to lose everything. He'll make sure Hannah eventually hates you. He'll make sure you're left with nothing. Better go back now before it's too late." There was one specific night, about 5 weeks after that night at the police station, when I almost gave in. It was 2 a.m, and I was sitting on the hotel bathroom floor, the cold of the tiles penetrating my skin through the thin pajamas. I'd picked up my phone with the intention of texting Christopher. "You win. I'll come back. Please make this stop." My fingers hovered over the keyboard, the letters blurred by tears. It would be so easy. Press send. End this war. Return to the prison that at least was familiar. But then I looked up and saw my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was unrecognizable. Unwashed hair for days, eyes sunken in deep purple circles, hollowed cheek from weight loss, pale and almost transparent skin. But what shocked me most were the eyes. They were dead, completely lifeless, like the eyes of something that had already given up inside even if the body was still functioning. And I realized, if I went back to him now, that dead woman was who I'd be forever. There would be no recovery. There would be no rebirth. It would be accepting that I was worth nothing, that I deserved the lies, that my only value was in being a doormat for a man who never respected me. I deleted the unsent message, washed my face with ice water, went back to bed where Hannah slept, and even without sleeping, even sinking into the deepest pit of despair I'd ever known, I didn't send that message. The next day, Patricia called with devastating news. Christopher was suing for shared custody of Hannah, claiming I was alienating her against him. "But she's 19 years old," I screamed into the phone. "She's an adult. He can't sue for custody." "It's not legal custody," Patricia explained, voice tired. "But he's claiming emotional coercion. He's saying you manipulated a vulnerable daughter against him and wants the court to order that she has to do mandatory therapy with him present. It's absurd and probably won't pass, But Michelle, it's going to be another lawsuit. More money, more time, more wear. I had no more money. The little Patricia was charging me was already coming from Hannah's college fund. How long could I continue before I couldn't afford legal representation anymore? And then what? Represent myself against Christopher's expensive lawyers? I'd be massacred. He knew this. He was using the legal system not to win, but to exhaust me financially and emotionally until I had no choice but to accept whatever crumbs he offered. That night, sitting on the hotel bed with Hannah, looking at the bank statement on the laptop showing increasingly smaller numbers, I finally said out loud the thought that had terrified me for weeks. Hannah, I don't know if I can continue. Not like this. He's going to completely destroy me and there's nothing I can do to stop it. Hannah closed the laptop hard, turned to face me, her green eyes, so much like mine, burning with an intensity that surprised me. So he wins? Everything he did, all the lies, all the years he stole from you, and he just wins because he has more money and fewer scruples? It's not about winning or losing. It's exactly about that, Mom. He's betting you'll break before he does, that you'll give up because it's easier than fighting. And maybe it is easier. Maybe going back to him, pretending nothing happened, living in the lie is easier. But you're already dead inside if you do that. And I'd rather have a poor and fucked up but alive mother than a rich and dead inside mother. Her words hit me like a physical slap. She was right. God, she was so right. And shamefully, I needed my 19-year-old daughter to remind me of that. I'm so scared, I whispered, and it was the first time I admitted it out loud. I'm afraid of him. I'm afraid of what he'll do. I'm afraid of losing everything. I'm afraid that in the end he was right and I really am too weak, too crazy, too inadequate. Hannah hugged me tight and I felt her own tears wetting my shoulder. You're the strongest person I know, Mom. You might not feel it now, but you are. Because even at the bottom of this horrible pit, even wanting to give up, you're still here, still fighting. Even if it's just continuing to breathe, that's still fighting. And eventually, you'll climb out of this hole. And I'll be here holding the rope. We slept hugging that night, two broken women trying to keep themselves whole through pure willpower and stubborn love. But while Hannah finally fell asleep, exhausted from carrying me, I looked at the hotel room ceiling and wondered, how long can a person continue like this before breaking completely? And when she inevitably broke, would there be pieces big enough to put back together? Or would it be dust too fine to rebuild? The change didn't come as a dramatic ray of light or cinematic epiphany moment. It came on a gray Tuesday, 6 weeks after that night at the police station, in the form of a 60-year-old woman named Dorothy, who worked at the hotel reception. I was in the lobby trying to extend our stay one more week with a credit card I prayed wouldn't be declined, when Dorothy stopped me with a gentle hand on my arm. Honey, are you okay? I don't want to intrude, but I've been seeing you here for weeks and you don't look well. Something about her genuine concern, so simple and direct, broke the last barrier I was maintaining. I started crying right there, in the middle of the lobby, ugly and loud sobs that made other guests look uncomfortable. Dorothy led me to a small back room, made me sit down, and put a cup of hot tea in my trembling hands. I don't know your story, she said, sitting beside me, but I know that look. I had that look 25 years ago when I finally left my ex-husband. I looked at her, really looked, and saw something I'd been missing these terrible weeks. Living hope. Dorothy wasn't broken. She was whole, smiling, with those kind eyes that had already seen hell and come out the other side. You survived, I whispered, and it wasn't a question. It was reverent amazement. I survived, and you will too. I know it doesn't seem like it now. I know it feels like you're drowning, and every time you manage to breathe, another wave pulls you down. But honey, eventually the waves stop. Eventually you reach the shore. And when you do, you'll realize you swam a distance you never imagined being capable of. She wrote a phone number on a piece of paper. This is a support group for divorced women. We meet every Thursday at 7 in the evening at the Methodist Church on Colfax. It's not religious, just women who understand. Come tomorrow. Just try. I took the paper, doubting I'd go, but thanked her because she was being kind, and kindness had become so rare it hurt to receive it. But that night, unable to sleep as always, I looked at that crumpled piece of paper on the nightstand. Hannah had class until late on Thursday. I'd be alone anyway. What did I have to lose besides an hour of my miserable life? Thursday evening, I drove to the Methodist church expecting half a dozen old ladies having tea and lamenting about alimony. What I found was a room with 23 women of all ages, races, and stories, sitting in a circle on folding chairs. And when I entered late and embarrassed, they all turned and smiled. Not pity smiles, smiles of recognition, of sisterhood. "Welcome," said the facilitator, a beautiful black woman in her 40s with locks down to her waist. "I'm Tanya. You don't have to speak today if you don't want to. Just listen. But if you want to share, this is a safe space. What's said here, stays here." I sat in the only empty chair between a pregnant woman who didn't look older than 25 and a white-haired lady who must have been 70. I heard stories that night that made mine seem mild. I heard about domestic violence so brutal it left permanent scars. I heard about husbands who took every cent and disappeared. I heard about lost custodies, about children turned against mothers, about years of psychological abuse that did brainwashing so deep it took decades to undo. And I heard about survival, about women who'd slept in cars with small children and now had their own apartments, about women who'd attempted suicide and now helped other women choose life, about slow, painful, but possible reconstruction. When it was my turn to speak, the words just came out. I told everything: the police station, the betrayals, the gaslighting, the terror, the desire to give up. When I finished, I was crying again, but different. It wasn't crying of despair. It was crying of relief from finally being in a place where no one would question my sanity, no one would tell me I was overreacting, no one would make me feel guilty for not being strong enough. "You're stronger than you think," Tanya said when the group ended and the women started leaving. "I know you don't feel it, but woman, you left. So many can't even do that. You're here. You're fighting. That's already strength." She gave me her card. "I'm a therapist specializing in abusive relationship trauma. I know you said you can't seek therapy for fear of your ex using it against you in court, but Michelle, you need professional help. And I can guarantee you that taking care of your mental health, especially in the context of traumatic divorce, will never be seen negatively by a competent judge. Actually, it shows you're taking proactive steps." She paused, holding my hands. "And more important, you can't fight this war if you're bleeding inside. You need to stop the bleeding first." I scheduled an appointment for the following week. It was one of the hardest decisions I'd ever made, admitting I needed help, that I wasn't managing alone. But it was also liberating. Therapy with Tanya became my anchor point in the storm. Once a week, for 50 minutes, I had a place to be completely honest about how broken I was without fear of judgment or repercussion. She taught me about trauma, about how my body was in constant survival mode, and why I couldn't sleep, eat, or function normally. "You're not crazy," she said in the third session. "You're having completely normal reactions to an abnormal and traumatic situation. Your husband spent years conditioning you to doubt yourself. This doesn't disappear overnight just because now you have proof. Gaslighting leaves deep scars." She gave me tools: breathing exercises for when panic attacks started, grounding techniques when dissociation threatened, structured journaling to document everything and also to process emotions. Slowly, very slowly, I started feeling small cracks in the wall of despair that had surrounded me. One day, I woke up and realized I'd slept 3 hours straight. Small victory, but victory. Another day, I managed to eat a whole sandwich. Another victory. Hannah noticed the change. "You look less gray," she said one morning while we had coffee together. "Not pink yet, but maybe beige now?" We laughed, and I realized it was the first time I'd laughed for real in almost 2 months. The sound of my own laughter surprised me. Strange and rusty, but real. It was around that time Patricia finally managed to partially unblock the accounts. Not everything, but enough for me to rent a small apartment. "It's temporary," she explained, "until we sort out the complete division of assets. But at least you'll have your own space. You'll stop bleeding money on hotels." The apartment was tiny, 1 bedroom and living room in an old building in Capitol Hill with noisy plumbing and temperamental heating. But it had a large window in the living room that let in sunlight. And when I signed the rental contract, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long I almost didn't recognize it. Hope. Small, fragile, easily crushable, but there. Hannah and I spent an entire weekend setting up that apartment with thrift store furniture and donations. Every item we put in place was an act of resistance. A scratched but solid dining table. A second-hand moss-green sofa that was ugly but comfortable. Mismatched dishes we got at Goodwill. Nothing matched. Everything was imperfect. But it was ours. It had no history with Christopher. It had no contaminated memories. It was a clean start, even if modest. On the first night sleeping in that apartment, lying on an air mattress because we still hadn't gotten a real bed. I heard the sound of the city outside, distant horns and voices of people passing on the street, and felt strangely at peace. This small, imperfect place was mine. My name on the contract. My choice to be here. My life, finally, starting to be mine again. But the peace lasted exactly 3 days. Christopher discovered the address, obviously, because he always discovered everything. He didn't appear personally because of the restraining order, but he sent flowers. 3 dozen red roses with a card that said, "New house, new beginning. It's still our wedding anniversary next week. Think about what you really want, Michelle." The hour anniversary. As if we still had an hour. As if 18 years of lies deserved to be celebrated. I threw the flowers in the trash, but the card haunted me. Because he was right about one thing. Our wedding anniversary was coming. 19 years since I said yes to that man in front of everyone we loved, promising eternal love, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. What a naive woman I was. What a foolish 23-year-old child, thinking love was enough, that choosing well was enough, that being a good wife would be enough. The following Thursday, at the support group, I shared about the flowers and the approaching anniversary. "He's trying to make you question your decision," said Marissa, one of the women in the group who was 3 years ahead of me in the divorce journey. "On anniversaries, Christmas, her birthday, on any significant date, he'll try to pull you back. It's classic manipulation. Don't fall for it." But knowing intellectually it was manipulation and emotionally resisting were different things. On our anniversary day, I woke up with a feeling of loss so deep it hurt physically. 19 years. Almost 2 decades of my life invested in that man, in that marriage, in that lie. How did I just let that go? How did I accept that everything was waste? Tanya, in our session that afternoon, said something that changed my perspective. It wasn't waste, Michelle. You have Hannah, who is living proof that something beautiful came from that marriage. And you learned lessons, even if painful, about who you don't want to be, about what you won't tolerate ever again. That knowledge, bought with pain, is valuable. Don't let him steal that too by calling everything waste. She was right. Hannah was the best thing that ever happened to me. And this horrible ordeal was showing me a strength I didn't know I had, was showing me who my true friends were, was forcing me to rebuild an identity beyond Christopher Harper's wife. Painful? Absolutely. But waste? Maybe not. On the anniversary night, instead of spending it crying alone as Christopher probably expected, I went to dinner with Hannah, Dorothy from the hotel, and Sarah, 4 women at a cheap Thai restaurant, eating pad Thai and laughing at bad jokes. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the romantic anniversary dinner of my young dreams. But it was real. It was honest. It was true love, not the counterfeit version I'd lived for so long. On the way home, my phone rang. Private number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Michelle. Christopher's voice, that voice that once made me feel safe and now only produced nausea. Don't hang up. Please, just listen to me for a minute. I should have hung up, should have blocked, but some masochistic part of me wanted to hear what he had to say. It's our anniversary. 19 years, Michelle. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Are you going to throw it all away because of some mistakes? Some mistakes. As if years of systematic betrayal were some mistakes. As if proposing to another woman while married to me was a mistake. Christopher, my voice came out surprisingly firm, you didn't make some mistakes. You built an entire double life, planned a future with another woman, made me question my sanity for years. That's not a mistake. That's choice. Repeated, deliberate, cruel choices. I was confused. The marriage had been bad for years, you know that. We were just going through the motions. I sought connection elsewhere. It was wrong, I admit. But it doesn't mean I didn't love you. No. The word came out like a shot. Don't you dare. You don't love someone and do this to them. You don't love someone and then try to destroy them when you're caught. You don't know what love is, Christopher. You only know what possession is. And I'm not your possession anymore. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but my heart was curiously calm. For the first time, I had defended myself completely, hadn't let him rewrite history, hadn't let him make me question my reality. Hannah, who'd heard my side of the conversation from the passenger seat, squeezed my hand. Proud of you, Mom. So proud. And in that moment, driving through the streets of Denver on a cold November night, my daughter beside me and my own voice still echoing with strength I didn't know I had, something fundamental changed inside me. It wasn't that the pain had gone away. It wasn't that I was suddenly healed. But for the first time since that night at the police station, I felt that maybe, just maybe, I was going to survive this. More than survive. Maybe I was really going to live again. 2 days later, Patricia called with news that changed everything. Michelle, sit down. You're going to want to be sitting for this. My stomach tightened. What happened? Vanessa contacted my office. She wants to talk to you. The world stopped. Why? Is it a trap? Is she going to try? I don't know her motives, but she said she has information you need to hear. Information about Christopher that, in her words, will guarantee you win everything in the divorce. Yada, Michelle, I think she might be turning against him. And suddenly, the woman I'd seen as an enemy, as the destroyer of my marriage, was offering the weapon I needed to finally free myself completely. I met Vanessa Pritchard 3 days later at a discreet coffee shop in the Highlands neighborhood, far from anywhere we might be recognized. Patricia insisted on being present, sitting at a nearby table but not the same one, giving the illusion of privacy while witnessing everything. When Vanessa entered, 15 minutes late, I was shocked by her appearance. The impeccable woman in tight suits and perfectly blown-out hair I remembered was unrecognizable. Her hair was pulled back in a sloppy ponytail, no makeup, deep dark circles, and her hands were shaking when she pulled the chair. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice hoarse as if she'd been crying a lot recently. "I know I'm the last person you want to see." I stayed silent, waiting. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. "He discarded me," she continued, looking at the coffee cup in front of her instead of at me. 2 weeks ago. Said I was a liability now, that I caused too many problems, that he needed space. And then I found out there's another one. There have always been others, Michelle. We weren't special. None of us were. I felt something strange moving in my chest. It wasn't satisfaction from seeing her suffer. It was recognition. It was the shared pain of women manipulated by the same man. "How many?" I asked, my voice gentler than intended. "That I know for sure? 7, in the last 10 years. Some lasted months, some years. I lasted 2.5 years. The longest before me was 3 years, a consultant from San Francisco." She finally looked at me, and her eyes were red and swollen. "He has a pattern. He chooses younger women, ambitious, usually in professional positions where he can be a mentor. Makes you feel special, chosen, like someone finally sees your potential, and then slowly traps you. Promises of a future, talks about leaving his wife, about how you're different from all the others." Each word was a blade, but I needed to hear, needed to understand the full extent of the betrayal. "He made you believe the marriage was over for years, right?" I continued. "That he was just waiting for the right moment to get divorced because of his daughter." Vanessa nodded, tears starting to fall. "He said you slept in separate rooms, that you hadn't had sex in years, that you knew about me but accepted it because you'd also moved on. I really believed it, Michelle. I swear I believed he was being honest. Part of me wanted to scream at her, say she was stupid for believing, that it was obvious he was lying. But looking at that broken woman in front of me, I saw my own reflection. Saw another woman who'd believed his lies because he was convincing, because she wanted to believe, because we all want to believe we're special, we're different. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Why risk his wrath by coming to me?" Vanessa pulled out a large bag and started taking out folders. "Because when he discarded me, I got angry. I got so fucking angry that I hacked into his computers. I have access to the company systems because I work directly with him. And I found things, Michelle. Things much worse than betrayal." She slid the first folder across the table. "Corporate fraud. He's been embezzling money from the company for years. Small amounts that wouldn't be noticed individually, but that add up to almost $500,000. He used it to pay for our trips, gifts, even the ring he gave me." My blood froze. I opened the folder and saw bank statements, transfers, accounting documents I didn't completely understand, but that clearly showed irregularities. "There's more," Vanessa continued, sliding another folder. "He was using privileged company information to make investments. Insider trading. It's a federal crime, Michelle. If this information reaches the right authorities, he won't just lose the divorce. He'll go to prison." I looked at those documents, my mind racing. This changed everything. It wasn't just about an unfaithful husband. It was about a criminal. "Why are you giving me this? You could be implicated too." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "And honestly, maybe I deserve it. I participated in this, even without knowing the extent. But Michelle, I can't let him continue destroying people. She paused, wiping tears. You're not the first wife. He was married before, did you know? Before you. It only lasted 2 years, 25 years ago. She lives in Seattle now. I contacted her through social media. He did the same thing to her. The betrayals, the gaslighting, tried to destroy her in the divorce. The difference is, she was young, without resources, and he succeeded. She was left with nothing. The floor seemed to be moving under my feet. Christopher had been married before? In 19 years together, he never mentioned it. Not once. There's one more thing, Vanessa said, hesitating. The new one. The woman he's with now. She's 24 years old, Michelle. Just out of college, she's an intern at the company. And she doesn't know anything. Doesn't know about you, about me, about the others. She thinks he's single. 24 years old. Hannah's age in 5 years. The nausea I felt was visceral. You need to stop him, Vanessa said, holding my hand across the table. Her touch surprised me, but I didn't pull back. Not for me. I made my choices and will live with the consequences. But for that girl, for all the next ones. Because he won't stop, Michelle. Men like him never stop. I left that cafe with 3 heavy folders of evidence and a completely new perspective. Christopher wasn't just an unfaithful husband. He was a systematic predator with a decades-long pattern. And finally, I had the weapons to stop him. Patricia examined the documents that same night in her office. My God, she whispered, turning page after page. Michelle, this is huge. If half of this is verifiable, and it appears to be, Christopher is finished. Professionally, financially, possibly criminally. What do we do? I asked, my voice strangely calm. First, we copy everything. Multiple copies, multiple secure locations. Then, we use this as leverage in the divorce. He'll accept any terms we ask in exchange for not taking this to the authorities. And Michelle, she looked at me directly, you're going to come out of this with the house, with half of everything he has, with generous alimony. He has no choice now. And if he doesn't accept, if he calls our bluff, then we hand everything to the FBI and his company's legal department, and he goes to jail. In the following days, Patricia put together a divorce settlement proposal that was, in her words, aggressively favorable to me. Christopher would receive the documents on a Friday afternoon with a 72-hour deadline to respond. If he didn't respond or refused, the evidence would be handed to authorities Monday morning. It was the longest week of my life. Christopher was silent on Friday. Saturday passed without word. Sunday night, my phone rang. It was Richard Brennan, his lawyer. Mrs. Harper, my client would like to accept the proposed terms, he said, his voice notably without the usual arrogance. He asks only that the evidence you possess not be made public or handed to authorities. He's in no position to ask for anything, Patricia responded. I'd put it on speakerphone. But if he signs everything by tomorrow at noon, we agree to keep the documents confidential as long as he complies with all terms of the agreement. If he violates any clause, everything becomes public. Are we clear? Crystal clear. By Monday at noon, Christopher had signed everything. No fight. No counter-proposals. No more manipulation. The house was mine. Half of all investment accounts. Generous monthly alimony for 10 years. Complete legal custody of Hannah, not that it mattered since she was an adult. And a no-contact clause that prohibited him from approaching Hannah or me except in extreme family emergency situations. It was over. 19 years of marriage dissolved in one signature. I should have felt victorious, should have felt vindicated, but what I felt was empty. A strange emptiness, neither good nor bad, just space where constant pain used to be. It's normal, Tanya assured me in therapy. You spent months in intense survival mode. Now that the immediate threat has passed, your body doesn't know what to do with the absence of constant adrenaline. The emptiness will pass, and eventually, you'll start filling that space with things that really matter. She was right, but it took time. I moved back to the house in December, 2 days before Christmas. Walking through those rooms was surreal. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, but felt completely different. Christopher had taken his clothes and personal belongings, leaving strange gaps. A half-empty closet, shelves with spaces. The impression of someone erased, but not completely. Hannah and I spent Christmas week redecorating. We took all his photos off the walls, rearranged furniture, painted the master bedroom, covering the blue he chose with a soft yellow I'd always wanted. Each change was an exorcism. Each alteration reclaimed the space as mine. At Christmas, Sarah, Dorothy, Tanya, and some women from the support group came for dinner. It wasn't the traditional nuclear family Christmas I'd always imagined. It was better. It was real. It was full of genuine love, not the performative version Christopher and I had represented for years. It was on New Year's that I really felt the change. I was alone in the house. Hannah had gone to a party with friends, and at midnight, instead of being with a husband, I was alone on the sofa with a glass of wine. It should have been sad. I should have felt lonely. But when the fireworks started outside and I heard the neighbors shouting, "Happy New Year," I smiled. Because for the first time in years, a new year really meant a new beginning. I didn't have to drag the weight of lies from the previous year. I could start clean. January brought unexpected news. Christopher's company discovered the financial irregularities on their own during a routine audit. They fired him immediately and filed a civil lawsuit to recover the embezzled funds. Christopher didn't go to jail, Patricia explained, because technically we didn't hand the evidence to criminal authorities, but he lost everything professionally. His reputation was destroyed. Tech companies are small communities. Nobody was going to hire him now. "He's bankrupt," Patricia said without emotion. "Between the divorce settlement that forced him to give you half of everything and the company lawsuit, he's literally bankrupt. He'll have to sell the apartment he rented, the car, everything." I waited to feel satisfaction about that, waited to feel justice had been done. But I only felt tired. Tired of the whole saga, all the drama. I just wanted to move forward. And slowly, painfully, that was exactly what I was doing. I started working in February, first freelance in graphic design, rediscovering skills I'd let rust for almost 20 years. It was scary, putting my work out in the world again, but also exciting. Each completed project was proof that I existed beyond Christopher Harper's ex-wife. I did therapy religiously, kept going to support group every Thursday, learned to cook new things, started doing yoga. Small steps, but steps. In March, 6 months after that night at the police station, I looked in the mirror and recognized the woman looking back for the first time. Not the woman I was before Christopher. That woman was lost forever. But a new woman, older, more tired, with scars that would never completely disappear, but also stronger, wiser, more honest, more real. Hannah flourished too, returned to college full-time, her grades improved, she started dating someone kind who treated her well. "I never knew what a healthy relationship was until I saw Dad and you," she told me one night. "I thought jealousy was love, that control was care, that lies were protection, but now I see the difference. And Mom, thank you for being strong enough to leave. You saved me too, not just yourself." I cried that night, but they were good tears. Tears of relief that at least my daughter learning what not to accept in a relationship, had been saved from the wreck. 3 months later, on an ordinary June afternoon, I was in the yard planting tomatoes when I saw a familiar car slow down in front of the house. Christopher. My body immediately froze, heart racing, hands starting to shake. But he didn't stop, just slowed down, looked at the house for a few seconds, and continued. It was only later I realized the significance of that moment. I had seen him, had felt the panic reaction start, but I hadn't collapsed, hadn't run inside, hadn't called Patricia or the police, had just continued planting tomatoes, because he didn't have power over me anymore. Not really. He was just a man in a car, passing by. He was no longer the center of my universe, the sun around which everything orbited. He was just Christopher, flawed, human, irrelevant to my life now. And that realization, that quiet moment in the garden with dirt under my nails and sun on my face, was when I knew I had really survived. Not just survived, had started living again. Today, 2 years after that horrible night at the police station when Hannah called me crying and my world completely fell apart, I'm sitting on the back deck of the house that is now truly mine, having coffee while the sun rises over Denver, and I can honestly say, I'm okay. Not perfect. Not completely healed. The scars are still here, some visible, others invisible, but equally real. There are bad days where the trauma resurfaces without warning, where a familiar smell or a specific song transports me back to those terrible months. But those days are more spaced out now, and when they come, I know how to navigate through them without drowning. The house has been completely transformed. Every room was repainted, redecorated, reimagined. The office where Christopher used to make his secret calls is now my design studio, with a huge desk covered with projects and an entire wall of inspiration. The bedroom we shared for so many years has completely new furniture, different colors, different energy. There are no ghosts here anymore, just memories I'm at peace having left behind. My freelance graphic design business grew beyond my most optimistic expectations. I started small, taking jobs here and there, but in a year I had enough regular clients to support myself comfortably. I'm not rich, never will be, but I earn my own money, pay my own bills, make my own decisions. The financial independence I conquered is worth more than any amount Christopher could have given me. Hannah graduated in psychology in May with honors, and now she's in her first year of her master's in marriage and family therapy. I want to help other families before they get to the point we did, she told me when she announced her choice of specialization. I want to help people see the signs you didn't see, or that you saw but ignored. She's been seriously dating for a year a guy named Marcus, kind and respectful, who treats my daughter like the rare jewel she is. When I met him for the first time, I studied every gesture, every word, looking for red flags, warning signs. Patricia gently reminded me that not every man is Christopher, that I can't project my traumas onto every relationship Hannah will have. The Thursday support group is still an essential part of my routine. Now I don't just go to receive support, but to give it too. New women arrive regularly, with that same broken and lost look I had 2 years ago, and I can offer something precious. Living proof that it's possible to survive, rebuild, thrive. I became co-facilitator with Tanya, and there's something deeply healing about transforming my pain into purpose, about using the hardest lessons of my life to illuminate the path for other women in darkness. Dorothy from the hotel became a true friend, almost like a second mother. We have lunch twice a month, and she tells me stories of her own reconstruction journey 25 years ago, reminding me that time really heals, even when it seems impossible. Sarah and I rebuilt our friendship, stronger than before because now it's based on complete honesty, not the superficial conversations we had when I was still pretending my marriage was perfect. I made new friendships too, women who know me only as Michelle, not as anyone's ex-wife. And there's a delicious freedom in being seen without the context of my traumatic past. As for Christopher, I hear occasional updates through Denver's small community, but he's become irrelevant to my narrative. I know he's working in sales for a smaller company, a significant demotion from the position he had. I know he lived with the 24-year-old intern for a few months before she found out about his past and broke up. I know his mother, who always treated me coldly during the marriage, tried to contact me last year wanting to apologize, but I politely declined. Some bridges are better left burned. Hannah sees him occasionally, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, usually at his initiative trying to rebuild some kind of relationship. She's cordial but distant, and tells me he seems smaller now, diminished, no longer the imposing and controlling man who dominated our house. He asks about you sometimes, she told me recently. Asks if you're okay, if you're dating someone, if you still live in the house. I think he finally understood what he lost. But for me, it's not about what he lost. It's about what I gained, myself back. Dating isn't on my radar yet, and honestly, I don't know if it ever will be. The idea of trusting someone that way, of becoming vulnerable again, still terrifies me. Tanya says that's normal, that there's no deadline for when I should be ready for another relationship, if ever. For now, I'm okay alone. Better than okay. I'm learning to know myself outside the context of being half of a couple, and discovering I really like the woman I am when I'm not performing for anyone. I traveled alone for the first time in January, a week in Santa Fe visiting art galleries and walking through the mountains. It was terrifying at first, eating alone at restaurants, sleeping alone in hotel rooms, having no one to share experiences with. But on the 3rd day, something changed. I stopped seeing loneliness as lack and started seeing it as freedom. Freedom to go where I wanted, eat what I wanted, wake up when I wanted, without negotiating or compromising or considering someone else's preferences. It was invigorating. The lessons I learned in these 2 years could fill books, but some stand out as particularly crucial. First, trust your instincts. That little voice that whispered something was wrong from the beginning was right. Always was. I spent years silencing my own intuition because it was easier, more comfortable, less scary than facing the truth. I'll never ignore that whisper again. Second, isolation is an abuser's weapon. Christopher systematically cut me off from friendships, from my own career, from independent identity. Made it seem like love, seem like protection, but it was control. Any healthy relationship encourages individual growth, not dependence. Third, gaslighting is real and devastating. Years of having my reality constantly questioned left me genuinely insecure about my own sanity. Documenting everything, trusting concrete evidence, seeking validation from trusted sources was essential to recovering my sense of reality. Fourth, leaving is just the beginning. I thought the hard part would be making the decision to divorce. But rebuilding after, dealing with trauma, learning to function again, was work of years, not days or months. I also learned about the complexity of feelings in situations of abuse and betrayal. For a long time, I blamed myself for still having love for Christopher even after everything he did. I thought it meant I was weak, pathetic, broken. Tanya helped me understand that love and betrayal can coexist, that you can simultaneously love someone and recognize they're toxic, and you need to stay away. Those feelings don't magically cancel out. They stay confused and contradictory, and that's okay. That doesn't make your decision to leave less valid. About warning signs every woman should know. Beware of men who put you on a pedestal at first, but gradually start isolating you. Beware of partners who make you constantly question your perception of reality. Beware of those who have disproportionate reactions to simple questions about where they were or with whom. Beware of sudden changes in behavior, especially around privacy with phones and computers. Beware of those who blame you for their own transgressions. And above all, beware of those who make you feel crazy for trusting your own instincts. But beyond warning signs, I learned about reconstruction, about how it's possible, even when it seems impossible. In the first months, I couldn't imagine a future where I wasn't in constant pain. Couldn't imagine laughing again, enjoying something again, waking up without the immediate weight of sadness. But gradually, very gradually, those moments came. First, they were seconds of peace, then minutes, then hours, then whole days where I didn't think about him, where I was genuinely present and happy in the moment. The process wasn't linear. There were setbacks. There were bad days, even months after thinking I was okay. But the general trend was healing, improvement, life coming back in. And now, 2 years later, I can honestly say most of my days are good. Some are even excellent. I have purpose in my work. I have connection in my friendships. I have love in my relationship with Hannah. I have peace in my home. These things are precious beyond measure, and I won't take them for granted ever again. For any woman reading this who is where I was 2 years ago, desperate and broken and not knowing if she'll survive, I want you to know some things. First, you're not alone. Millions of women have gone through this and come out the other side. You will too. Second, it won't be easy. It's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. There will be days where you want to give up, go back, accept crumbs because it seems easier, resist, keep going. Third, you're stronger than you think. Strength isn't not being afraid. It's being afraid and doing it anyway. It's breaking completely and still waking up the next day and trying again. You have that strength, even if you don't feel it now. Fourth, seek help. Therapy, support groups, trusted friends, any available resource. You can't do this alone and shouldn't have to. Accept help when offered. Fifth, document everything. Every message, every incident, every lie discovered. This will be crucial legally and emotionally. Sixth, protect yourself financially. Open separate accounts, gather important documents, have a financial exit plan. Money is power in divorce situations. Seventh, don't be ashamed. You didn't cause this. You didn't deserve this. No matter what he says, no matter how he tries to rewrite history, the betrayal and abuse are his choices, not your failures. Eighth, protect your children, but be honest in age-appropriate ways. Hannah saved me because she was brave enough to confront me with the truth. If your children are old enough to understand, don't lie to protect the other parent's image. Ninth, healing isn't linear. There will be bad days even after many good days. That doesn't mean you're failing or regressing. It's just how trauma works. Be gentle with yourself. 10th, you will survive this. Not just survive, but eventually thrive. Life after divorce from toxic relationship can be incredibly beautiful. Different from your original plans, yes, but possibly better in ways you can't imagine yet. Hannah frequently tells me I'm her hero, but the truth is, she's mine. Her courage in confronting me with painful truths, her strength in sustaining me when I was completely broken, her unconditional love through everything, saved me. Mothers, if there's anything I want you to take from this story, it's this. Your children are watching. They see more than you think. They learn about love, about respect, about what to tolerate in relationships by watching what you tolerate. By staying in an abusive or unfaithful marriage, you're not just harming yourself. You're teaching your children that this kind of treatment is acceptable, that love looks like control, that commitment means accepting betrayal. But by leaving, by choosing dignity over comfort, by rebuilding even when it's terrifying, you teach much more valuable lessons about strength, about self-love, about never accepting less than you deserve. This year's Mother's Day, Hannah gave me a letter I read whenever I need to remember why it was worth it. "Mom," she wrote, "thank you for being brave enough to save yourself. Because by doing that, you also saved me. You saved me from normalizing betrayal. You saved me from thinking love should hurt. You saved me from becoming you, trapped in unhappy marriage for decades. You broke the cycle. And one day, when I have my own daughters, I'll tell them about the grandmother who was strong enough to rebuild her entire life from scratch at 42 years old. You're my hero. I love you infinity." So here I am, Michelle Harper, 44 years old, divorced for almost 2 years, and for the first time since I married at 23, completely, totally, peacefully alone. And I discovered something surprising. I like this woman. I like the Michelle who paints at 6 in the morning because she wants to, not because she has to. I like the Michelle who travels alone and makes friends at cafes in strange cities. I like the Michelle who speaks her truth without apologizing. I like the Michelle who helps other women find courage to leave. I like the Michelle who is an incredible mother without losing herself in the role. I like the Michelle who is still learning, still healing, still growing. This Michelle is worth every moment of pain it took to find her. If I could go back in time and talk to that terrified woman sitting at the police station 2 years ago, holding Hannah's hand and shaking uncontrollably while looking at photos of her husband with another woman, I'd say this: you will survive this night. You'll survive the terrible weeks that come after. You'll survive the months of painful reconstruction. And one day, not as far as it seems now, you'll wake up and realize you didn't just survive, but that you built a life that's actually worth living. A life based on truth, not lies. A life full of real love, not performative version. A life where you're the protagonist, not supporting character in someone else's story. It's going to hurt. My God, how it's going to hurt. But pain that leads to healing is better than comfort that leads to slow death of the soul. Choose the pain. Choose the truth. Choose yourself. Always, always choose yourself. Because you deserve it. You always deserved it. And eventually, you'll believe that too. The sun is higher now, Denver waking to another day, and I finish my now cold coffee, smiling. I have a client to meet at 10, lunch with Sarah at noon, support group at 7 in the evening. A full, meaningful life, mine. Before going inside, I stop at the garden where tomatoes are starting to ripen, where I planted with trembling hands over a year ago when I saw Christopher drive by. The plants grew robust and healthy, loaded with bright red fruits. Like me, they took root in new soil. Like me, they survived the storm. Like me, they're thriving now, in the right place, at the right time, finally free to grow toward the light. And if I did it, believe me, you can too. The door is there. You just need to have the courage to turn the handle. I promise it's worth it.